In the Johto region's Violet City, there is a prestigious bastion of knowledge and academia, owned by a guy who suspiciously looks and sounds like a certain plumber that everyone knows. This is Earl and his Pokemon Academy, and what started out as just an early game tutorial in the Generation 2 handheld games, at one point became the most extensive library of Pokemon information in the world. And most players today completely missed out on it. This is the Pokemon school you never graduated from. When you first get to Violet City in Gold, Silver, Crystal, and the remakes, if you go towards the shop, you'll see a man loitering out front, and when you go up and talk to him, he starts dancing and singing and speaking in a funny accent. He wonders if you battled the city's gym leader yet and asks if you won. If you say yes, he congratulates you on your victory and keeps doing his thing, but if you say no, he says you need some training, and then invites you to follow him to a large building just north of the city's Pokemon Center. This is Earl's Academy, and it's an optional tutorial that sets up new players with the basics of Pokemon. The trend of having a school or a classroom to help out new players actually started in the very first generation with this little building in Viridian City here, but it wasn't until Generation 2 where the Pokemon School became an explicit and standard feature in an early game city. Think Rustborough's Trainer School in Gen 3, Jubilife's Trainer School in Gen 4, Striaton's School in Gen 5, and so on, and each one serves the same purpose. As far as the handheld games go, that's about all there is to these places, so most players, especially experienced ones, probably didn't give Earl's Academy a second look. But when Pokemon decided to go 3D, Game Freak took this concept of school and actually made it one of the coolest features on console. Pokemon Stadium 2 on the Nintendo 64 was a crucial part of my childhood, taking the 8-bit pixels out of our Game Boys and turning them into fully animated 3D goodness. You could battle in tournaments, challenge gym leaders, play mini-games, but most importantly for us today, it took us to school. Earl's Academy was made a feature in Stadium 2, and it was turned into a fully playable classroom environment, complete with lessons, tests, and battle challenges, and it included the most in-depth library of information on Pokemon that was out there, at least by Generation 2 standards. Each generation always brings new features and changes to the core game, so by the time Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald came out, Earl's Academy was a little outdated, but back in 01, this place was basically Pokemon Harvard. The Academy in Stadium 2 is separated into two sections, the classroom and the library. The library had all the information that was available to players back in Gen 2, neatly organized all in one place, and it really is a pretty in-depth resource. You could find info on all the moves Pokemon could learn back then, you could see which egg groups they belonged in, there was information on every item that existed in the games at that time, and there was even a really handy type chart showing advantages and disadvantages. You had access to basically all the knowledge in the world, except for things that weren't explicitly mentioned, stuff like EVs and IVs, which worked very differently in these earlier generations compared to today. If you needed to find the facts, Earl's Library was the place to be, but the classroom section is where this idea of school actually gets fun. So the classroom is divided by 3 levels of learning: Trainer class, Gym Leader class, and Elite Four class. Within each class, there's 3 subsections. A lecture where you get spoon-fed the information, followed by a quick question to make sure you paid attention. A test that you actually have to pass in order to graduate the class, and then battle challenges to really drive in what you learn from the lectures and the test. Once you pass all 3 sections, you get awarded a medal showing your mastery in that class, and then you can move on to the next level. Leave it to Pokemon to make school fun. This video gamification of school is, I think, why the concept of Pokemon Academy works so well. And even playing this back today to get the footage for this video, I found myself really enjoying going through it all. The classes scale in difficulty, with Trainer class being really easy, Gym Leader more intermediate, and Elite Four being the hardest, and to be honest, by the time you get to the E4 level, there's actually a good amount of brain power that goes into it, especially in the battle challenges. Trainer class covers super basic stuff like type advantages, set damage moves to play around stat changes, 2-turn attacks, and understanding the difference between physical and special moves. The battle challenges here are super easy. The Pokemon usually only have 1 move each, so it definitely feels scripted, and that is by design. You can still fail these challenges though by picking the wrong Pokemon. In Pokemon Stadium and its sequel, you still use a full team of 6, like normal, but for each battle you can only send out 3 of those 6, so you have to look at your opponent's team and decide which Pokemon are going to be the best for that battle. I remember doing this as a kid and failing some of these battles, and looking back, it was definitely because I picked the ones I wanted to use, instead of the ones the game was trying to get me to use to fully understand the lesson. For example, Last Nancy here in the trainer class specializes in Pokemon that use moves that affect accuracy and evasion, so the game clearly wants me to use the mons that have attacks which either never miss or which eliminate the stat changes, like this hazing Golbat, and it lets me completely walk all over her team. Trainer class is by far the easiest, and when you earn the Pichu medal after completing it, you can move on to the next level, and Gym Leader level is where things start to get more interesting. One of the first lectures is about damage multipliers from type advantages, but it also talks about same type attack bonuses, and I remember this being the first time I had ever heard of Stab back in Generation 2. In the first few gens, the games don't really do a good job at telling you about these kinds of mechanics, so having it dissected and broken down like this was a really nice feature for a younger me. It's at this level where Earl really starts dropping some hints about more advanced battle tactics that you'd see in competitive battles, and you definitely feel the progression as you go through these courses, especially when it calls back to previous lessons like the 2-turn attacks from trainer class. There's a new lesson that talks about how certain moves can still hit a Pokemon during those 2-turn moves, stuff like Twister, Gust, and Thunder hitting a Pokemon that's using Fly, and Earthquake and Magnitude hitting a Pokemon using Dig, and that stuff blew my mind when I was a kid, and I definitely owe that knowledge to Earl. Gen 2 was also where held items were introduced, and it's in this class where you learn about item and attack combos, stuff like having your Politoed hold a Miracle Berry to wake itself up after resting, or holding Bitter Berries to cure confusion after Outrage. The battle challenges get a little trickier here, with the levels of opponent Pokemon going higher than yours, and your mons consistently getting outsped. It all comes down to the 3 that you take into battle, and there is definitely right and wrong choices here. But once you pass the Gym Leader level, you're onto the Elite 4 class, and this is where the Academy gets really spicy. Elite 4 class covers a lot of the same topics that Gym Leader does, just with more complicated moves and more strategy. For example, despite how prominently weather was featured in the Hoenn games, weather conditions were actually introduced in Generation 2, and move combinations like Sunny Day and Solar Beam, or Rain Dance and Thunder, actually made their debut here, and it's these kinds of more advanced topics the Elite 4 class covers. By today's standards, these aren't exactly advanced tactics, but back in my day, it was the cream of the crop. One of the better lessons at this level is teaching your Pokemon moves that counter its weaknesses, something like Starmie learning Thunder to counter a Water-type Mirror Match, or Meganium learning Iron Tail to counter Ice types. Still not exactly advanced today, but kids in the 2000s had their minds blown with this stuff. Attack combos are also heavily featured here, stuff like Defense Curl doubling your rollout's damage, or trapping your opponent in a badly poisoned state with Toxic and Mean Look. And it's here where we really start getting into more competitive strategies, even stuff that still applies to this day. A standout lesson that I found really impressive is the one on reading your opponent's next move and being predictive, like anticipating your opponent to switch and then using a move that is super effective on the incoming Pokemon. That kind of thing just isn't taught in the handheld titles, and it's usually a game sense thing, something that comes through experience and time spent playing, but here it's a full-on lesson. When you finish the Elite 4 class, you have officially completed Earl's Academy, graduating and becoming the coolest kid on the block, and for all your hard work, you earn nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just a hint to go do some extra homework in the library. You know, it really is the complete school experience. Shout out to Stadium 2 for authenticity. Now, obviously, there were many players who graduated from this school back in 2001. It's not like it's a major feat, but if you're a younger Pokemon fan and never got to play Stadium 2, you definitely missed out on one of the best ideas that Game Freak came up with. It would be nice to see a modern resource like this, a gamified Pokemon school with up-to-date information, and they could use Earl's Academy as a template. It would be perfect for older fans like myself who maybe missed out on some of the newer generations of games. I had a really good time going back and playing through the Academy and making this video. Pokemon Stadium 2 was a huge part of my childhood, and I actually want to explore more corners of this game on the channel. Maybe we can look at Gym Leader Castle next. Let me know in a comment if that's something you'd like to see. But with that, I'm gonna take this diploma and go celebrate my success. I hope you had fun taking this trip down memory lane with me. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, or if you think school sucks, hit that thumbs down button. It's all interaction. Either way, I hope you consider subscribing for more Pokemon videos. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Star. Keep shining, baby.